Yesterday, 100 members of the UAW descended on a Bank of America in Detroit, jammed up the lobby, and shut down the bank. Why? Because Bank of America didn't pay its taxes. In 2009, Bank of America made $4.4 billion in profit, money left over after the end of the year, and paid zero taxes. That's right, nada, none, zilch. Maybe that's why the bank could afford handing over a $9 million bonus to their CEO, Brian Moynihan, back in January. Union President Bob King justified the UAW's protest by saying, quote, anything that would help the middle class, Bank of America opposed. When workers are struggling to pay child care and feed their families, Bank of America in 2010 made $17.5 billion from credit card and ATM fees. Similarly, the New York Times reported today that America's largest corporation, GE, made $14 billion internationally and over $5 billion in the United States, again, in profits, and the money left over after they paid everybody else and everything else. But instead of owing taxes, they got a $3 billion tax benefit. That's as in from you and me. So how is it that an extremely profitable corporation like Bank of America pays nothing in taxes, and GE even gets money back, whereas you and I are paying up to 35% in tax rates? Why is it that corporations paid 30% of the cost to government in the 1950s, but today pay only 6.6%, with you and me picking up the rest? Well, it's not a rhetorical question. It's a real question, and there's a real answer. It's because of something called corporate personhood. For 6,000 years of human history, with few exceptions, people didn't have rights. In charge of government during those times was either a king who held a hereditary title to power, a theocrat who claimed a divine claim to power, or a warlord who'd seize power by brute force. And only the kings, theocrats, and warlords had rights. Few privileges were trickled down to the people, like the privilege to have food or to get married, but even these usually required the permission of the king. This is how feudal societies were organized and run for 6,000 years. But when our founding fathers here in the United States set out to create this country, they borrowed an idea more than 2,000 years old from the Greeks, known as democracy. They also took a good dose of it from the Iroquois Confederacy, the Native American tribes up in northern New England. And a democracy takes that system of feudal government and flips it upside down. Instead, at the top, the people hold all the rights. And the people organized a government to represent them that granted privileges to churches and corporations. That's why the first three words of the Constitution are, we the people. Our founders knew that the best defense against tyranny, the best defense against the rise of kings, theocrats, and warlords taking over America, was to keep the power in the hands of the people. But over the last century and a half in America, corporations have steadily staked out more and more of what should be rights exclusively belonging to us, to living human beings, going to corporations. For example, the First Amendment right of free speech. It turns into the freedom to influence elections. Corporations are claiming that. In fact, once the Supreme Court gave them that right, transnational corporations began to carve up our tax code, create loopholes, and legalize offshore tax havens, something that wasn't happening back in the 50s. Corporations now are the new kings, and their agenda is to radically remake America into a neo-feudal system, which is why you're seeing things like the spectacles in Wisconsin, Ohio, Maine, and other states where corporate-owned politicians have come to power. Luckily, people are starting to take notice, like the UAW in Detroit and the U.S. Uncut movement taking on Bank of America, and people showing up to occupy state houses from Madison to Lansing. When we once and for all stand up and say that corporations are not people and thus do not have rights, then we will again be the America that our founders envisioned, a government that Lincoln said is government of the people, by the people, and for the people.